Hello and welcome to this gameplay episode. We've got an interesting question, which is the focus of this episode. We alluded to on last week's gameplay podcast, and you'll notice this is a gameplay pod on the main feed, just to keep things in sync with EA's campaign. So next week, we should have, hopefully, you'd imagine, FUT birthday, and that'll be a main feed content episode. So let's get into this gameplay pod. A cozier affair. We're missing Josh, as people may know if they call it this week's supporter content pod. But we have with us AirJapes. Hello, welcome back.
Thank you much, Ben. Happy to be back. Enjoying gameplay at the moment myself. So, eager to chat.
Yeah, and we have Alex, previously, of course, the FIFA analyst, now analysing FC, coaching, doing punditry, that sort of thing. Good to have you on again so soon after the last appearance, Alex.
Yeah, very good to be back again, Ben, and looking forward to talking gameplay with you fine gentlemen and hopefully educating a bit of the FC community.
Definitely, that's what we're looking to do, and I'll remind people of Cordless Hawk's question if people didn't catch it. So he says, I've been meaning to send this in for a while, but the podcast with AJ3 after Christmas, he was just trying to get better at the game. It was an amazing episode. My question is, how do you suggest we get better, and what 5 things would you do? I think a good proportion of the pod are like me, not even close to Japes or Ben's level, but how do we get there? It was interesting. Andy said he was becoming a student of the game. How would we do this? Would we watch a pro, or who would we watch? He says he was an 11 to 14 win player last cycle, but this year he's not been able to qualify for champs at all. I have the best team I've ever been able to assemble on a road to glory, overpowered players everywhere, but I can't seem to get better in any way. How does anyone like me get better rather than give up? And how do I know if it's my formation, instructions, players, connection? Where do you even start? I think, first of all, we should probably start by, he said, a top 5 of things that you should look to improve. Just off the top of your head a little bit here, Alex, if you had a top 5, just very simply, not too much explanation, what are the things that you get people who aren't maybe able to qualify for champs, or maybe are just looking to get those, first few key ranks, 9 wins, 11 wins, what would you tell them to focus on?
As a very kind of quick thing, without going into too much detail, right stick switching being a massive thing. When you just L1, LB switch, you can only change to the player closest to the ball, and that really limits you in being able to track through balls, put pressure on the opponent and everything with it. So you have to learn how to do that. Number 2, the sprint button. Everyone loves just holding down the sprint button unnecessarily. Just let go of it. And if you've heard the song from 𝘬𝘃𝘬𝘦, I hate it with a passion, the green, green grass. You're only allowed to sprint when you have green, green grass in front of you. And there's a good 5 to 10 yards of green, green grass. If there's a player in that area.
What about blue sky?
Oh, blue sky, don't get me started.
That's when you cross.
yeah, that's when you cross. Yeah, put it into row Z. That's the only time when you're allowed to sprint. So coming off that sprint button. Number 3 would be take the touch the way that you are faced, where the balls come from, sorry. So essentially, when you're playing the ball into your attacker, you don't want to try and take the touch on the turn into the defender. Take the touch to where the pass has already come from, because you know that lane is free, and you just make your ball retention so much better. 4th thing would be, when you're building up kind of in the midfield, make sure you're facing the way that you want to pass the ball. Keep things nice and simple. And then when you get into the final third, that's where you can be really expressive, try different things. Just allow yourself basically to try and get into the final third pretty much with every attack, because you're just going to ensure that you create so many more chances. And then the 5th thing would be your finishing. You have to make sure that you have a reliable way to finish. This year, you have a little bit of variety in the sense that you can go for a low driven inside the 18-yard box. You can shoot across your body. You can shoot near post. Ensuring that you kind of have those few finishing techniques pretty much nailed will just ensure that you score goals. So those kind of 5 things would be pinnacle.
I like all of those. They're all very, I guess, I would say mechanical, right? In terms of advice, which makes sense, especially from a coaching perspective. I'm wondering, Japes, from your perspective, in terms of non-mechanical elements, what are the things that you'd say to someone, actually, these would be the things that I would do, whether it's maybe more tactical mentality or something along those lines?
I would say go work on your mechanics.
Okay. well then.
Like, if you can't get 11 wins, or you're struggling qualifying for weekend league, like the first thing I would say is you got to fix your mechanics, because you can play a lot of different formations or a lot of different ways and get there. The bigger thing is, like, and I suppose we touched on it last week on the pod, you have to own your mistakes, like really own them, because I don't think that people do that enough. And if you are saying that it's something out of control, you're not going to try to get better at controlling it. So own your mistakes, even if it's something random that happens. Well, guess what? You probably let the player get into that position, didn't you? So I understand that just like real football, randomness and unlucky things happen. But if a player gets into your box and there's a deflection that doesn't go your way, well, you let them break down your defense enough to get into your box. So you got to own at least that part of it.
I think as well, to top that off, is that, like Jake said, like go to the mechanics. So many people go to the formation and the custom tactics. And to me, it plays a part when you get to the highest level massively. You know, there are certain things that are just so strong that you have to use. Yeah. But it's like me going onto YouTube right now. I'd love to lose a little bit of weight. I could type in how to get six-pack abs quick and go and do some of these quick exercises and get that kind of, this is what's going to get me there. If you don't have the fundamentals down, the rest of it just means nothing. So basically pick any sort of tactic and formation from someone that you trust online, and then go to what we've just said and just focus on your raw gameplay, and then the rest of it will come.
Yeah, and if you were to go watch somebody's like tactic, if you can't do, like if you would be making, like really watch their gameplay, if you would be making different decisions than they're making when they have the ball in those specific spots, or you can't pull off the same dribbling mechanics, you're probably going to struggle with that tactic.
Yeah.
Like the 4-3-2-1, I can get it to work for me, but I generally don't use players like 𝘵𝘃𝘀𝘀 or 𝘬𝘶𝗶𝘃𝗀𝘀. So when the players that I'm using get in those positions, it's like not as effective for me. Like I'm not going to dribble the same way. I'm not going to make the same decision. And so it doesn't, quote unquote, like work the way it's like working for that person.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, so we talk about a lot of tactics on this podcast, and it's like, it probably, like, all the listeners would probably have an easier time understanding some of the tactics if there was like a gameplay, I don't know, or a video archive where you can sort of see how it plays.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, if I think about the number of tactics that we've shared on the podcast over the years, and we've tried each other's quite a few times, you know, quite often it just doesn't really work for us, the other person's tactic, but there'll be lots of people out there who try it and have a lot of success with it. So
yeah,
there's always that personal preference, but there are certain tactics you could set up which are fairly simple, and you're going to be able to play in a fairly straightforward way without too many complications. I'm just thinking, if you're going to play, say, 3-4-3 and put press after possession loss on, that's going to be a pretty hard way to play if you're trying to improve at the game, because it is going to be pretty manic and probably not lead to you being able to get control of a game, for example. I don't know whether there's anything else you would say on that, Alex, in terms of things that you definitely shouldn't do, sort of in terms of tactics or setting up your team or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you go and run some obscure tactic, and even like in the 4-3-2-1 and having one fullback on balance, then having to play for that switch ball, when you don't fundamentally understand that, or you know, you look at a tactic and someone's saying, oh, it gets this movement like this, but then they're the ones that are triggering runs and using play locks, it's just simply not going to work. So yeah, just pick any form. I don't even care what formation it is. Just pick any formation. Have a very neutral setup in the sense of you're not going to really high depth or really low. You're not running constant pressure or press on possession loss. Just keep things neutral. Work on, you know, the actual game stuff that you can control. Then the rest of it can kind of come through.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point to make. One of the things you said in terms of your 5 things that should be focused on here is getting the ball into the final third. I think that would be a good one to expand on a bit more, because I guess people might be thinking, okay, I'm actually okay at building up, but often end up giving it away, and that leads to me getting countered. I think that's a common issue amongst players at that kind of level that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I think most people probably don't know how to get into the final third or how to reliably get there and get movement going from that. And I think it actually all stems from you picking the ball up in your own half, essentially. If you can't trigger runners, whether that's a player going long or a player going short, or even use creative runs and then player locks, I think you're going to have a tough time of it. And having a variety in the attack, so many people complain about, oh, there's too many people behind the ball, you know, putting players inside the 18-yard box, and I can't penetrate that 18-yard box, and then I get hit on the counter and I concede. Sometimes you need to transition quicker yourself. So I like to introduce a rule where every third attack should be different. And what I mean by that is if your last 2 attacks have been you picking up the ball inside your own half, you lay it to your centre mid, you get it to the wing, you try and take a 1v1 against their fullback, you either beat their fullback or you don't. You do that 2 times. That third attack should then be, right, I'm going to send my striker on a run. I'm going to play it to my centre mid who's got a long ball pass, and bang, I'm going to play that over the top. It might be that next third attack, you might run down the line, and instead of trying to beat the fullback, you cut inside, you look for a driven pass into the middle, then a first time pass into the 18-yard box. That sort of variety kind of coming through to give you basically different sort of options to attack can really confuse the opponent. And kind of going back to the core question about, well, how would we know this and how do we learn this? You as a person and as a player should go to moments in the game where you felt uncomfortable. And if that is you moving into the attack and you felt uncomfortable in how were you meant to beat this defender, or what sort of pass were you meant to do here, you can clip it. If you play on PlayStation, you can clip the last 15 seconds, super easy. You can do it on Xbox as well. PC users, you have to go a little bit further to try and make it so you can clip. But you go and clip that and you go, okay, I felt uncomfortable here. Clip it, carry on with the game, come back to it after. Then when you come back to it after, you go and take a look and you go, okay, well, we can pause it now and we can see we've got Y runner, Z runner, X runner all down there. Oh, I could have gone for this pass. I could have maybe laid it back into my centre mid, whatever it may be, who knows? And then you figure that out. You might look at it and you go, well, I don't know what I should have done. And that's a huge thing. You don't know what you don't know. And how do you learn from that? That's when you then go and look at external resources and you go and watch a pro, you go and watch just someone streaming, a high level player, and you try and look at what do they do in that specific area? Why don't they have that issue about people playing drop back, or how do they penetrate the 18-yard box? What sort of skill moves do they do? All those sort of things coming together will then give you a little bit of a, that looks like that could work. Now I'm going to go and try that during the game. And the thing is, people get so overwhelmed, I would say, during the match that everything that they've looked at outside of the match, they completely forget about. And that's where you need to be kind to yourself. Write it down on a sticky note, stick it in front of you, and just constantly look to keep reminding. You think about, I've made a recipe that me and the missus have for dinner. I still don't remember it to this day. I just get that recipe up and I go, yeah, this is what I need to do. For you, it might be putting that recipe in front of you and going, okay, when I get the ball on the edge of the 18-yard box and the defender has space to the left or the right, that's where a step over could work. Okay, let's do that 1,000 times and let's see how good I can get on it. And that sort of thing, when you take that sort of approach, should hopefully mean that in 6 months' time, you do feel a lot more reliable in getting into that final third altogether.
Nice. Yeah, fantastic advice. And there'll be more of that, I'm pretty sure, right after this break. Hello, welcome back after the break. So we were talking at the end there, or you were talking, Alex, about watching high-level gameplay. Now, that can be something that's very helpful, but I guess you have to bear in mind that there can be quite a big discrepancy in terms of the technical skills of the player watching. So what kind of things should players at the kind of qualification level of champs be looking for when they're watching high-level gameplay?
Well, it comes down to each individual person, right? Everyone has different things that they feel that they're good and bad at. So for one person, it might be using second man press. The other, it might be ball retention. You turn the ball over in the middle of the park all the time. You have to identify what the issue is that you want to fix yourself. And only you can do that, right? Someone else can look at your gameplay for you as a coach. And yes, that's a quick way to do that. But let's just say we're not going down that route. You need to figure that out yourself. So once you figure that out and you say, okay, for example, how are pros developing the attack forward when they pick the ball up with their fullback? What are they doing? Are they looking to switch the ball or are they driving with it? Okay, let's go and watch what pros do. So you go onto YouTube or you go onto Twitch and you go and find a pro player who's doing a Pro v Pro game, or even just playing champs themselves, whatever it is. The FC Pro YouTube channel has lots of games uploaded to it, so you can go back to them and take a look at. So you go and look at the specific thing that you want to work on, and that's the only thing that you're going to focus on. You're not going to look at every other little minute detail, because then you're just going to overload that information for yourself and it's going to make it really difficult for you to kind of draw it in, and you're only going to focus on that one thing. So you watch that pro and you identify what it is that they're doing, and you do it at a very raw level. You don't really need to go full to the ins and outs. Just when they get with the ball with a fullback, what are they doing? How are they transitioning it forward? Are they driving, with sprint 15, 20 yards? Are they using controlled sprint? Are they switching the ball? Whatever it may be. You work that out and you go, brilliant, thank you very much. I've seen that from Tex and the FC Pro Open. Now I'm going to go and have a go myself. what you can do is you can go into the skill game section of FC24 and then go to practice scenarios. And you have in there defensive and attacking scenarios where you can just try and rinse and repeat what it is that you're trying to learn and work on. And then once you've done it into that scenario, you might then go, okay, well, I've got some squad battles to play. I'll go and practice it against the AI. Myself, I don't like this approach because I very much think where the skill comes in 1v1 FC is, two humans making their split-second decision on what they think is the best thing to do. You don't really have that with the AI. But if you want to just get that muscle memory down of a certain skill move or a certain pass or whatever it may be, squad battles can be a place for some people to go. Then you go and take it into rivals and champs and whatever it may be. And you have to accept that the thing that you are learning on right now, you are not going to be an expert at. It may cost you games. You may turn the ball over. You might miss an opportunity that you would have took if you carried on with the old way. But you almost have to take one step back to allow yourself to then go 2 steps forward down the line. We're not here to try and get some quick fixes that are going to make us get more wins this weekend. It's about getting more wins in 12 months, 18 months, and kind of, improving as a player on that. And when you learn something, you're going to go, yeah, I've learned it. Great, let's go. And you're going to move on to the next thing. And then that thing that you've just learned in 4 weeks' time, you're probably going to fall back into your old habits. So it's a constant reminder to yourself that you have to keep going over things and keep freshening up on your skills. When you think about most jobs out there, for example, you learn something, what do they get you to do? They get you to continue doing that course once a year and over again, most of the time to tick a box, but they get you to keep going over on it. And the reason for that is you can get lazy and go into bad habits. So sometimes you need that refresher, essentially. So that's something to think about as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Going back to your kind of top 5, one thing which was quite simple, you explained, is the idea that if a pass has come to you, Alex, you want to move back in the direction the pass came from, because that's kind of a secure way, right, of circulating the ball. Yeah,
there's some things that you can take an approach on that are going to almost get you instant success with. There are a few things on it. Most things will take a little bit more time, but that, for example, is a very simple one. And when I say that, some people can take it to the nth degree where they think they should do that every single time. And what I'm really talking about is when you're taking that touch back from where the pass has come from, is normally when you're transitioning the ball into your attackers. Because when you lay the ball to your fullback, for example, they will have room in front of them because they're not going to be man-marked, essentially. So you can take the touch forward rather than where that pass has come from. So say, for example, you're laying the ball from your right centre-back to your right back, you can take that touch forward to progress forward. While as if you're laying the ball from your right mid to your striker, who is facing you, if you try and take that touch and turn towards the opponent's goal, well, who's going to be there? Van Dijk. He's going to be there straight away, ready to tackle you. So what do we then do? We take that touch back from where that pass is on. We then see how does he switch into his Van Dijk, and you can try and pick up on how quick the opponent will switch. And then it's about, okay, can I left sit dribble? Do I need to look to lay the ball off? Have I got a skill move or whatever to beat that Van Dijk? And there will be times where, say, for example, you have your tactics on direct passing. The opponent's Van Dijk starts running back towards his goal, and you then play the pass into your striker. You might have 3 to 4 yards between your striker and Van Dijk, meaning you will have time to take one touch, and now we're facing up Van Dijk. And then it's going, well, what skills do we have to beat the Van Dijk or look for a 1-2 or so on? So, don't take it to the, Alex said I must take the touch away from the opponent all the time. Take it from where the pass has come from, because it is situational. But there's too many times when I've been coaching students who just mindlessly turn the ball over, because when they get the ball into attackers, they just want to face up the opponent straight away when the opponent is already there ready to step in and take the ball off them. So trying to protect the ball a little bit more. A phrase which I like to use is, if anyone has kids out there, treat the ball like your kid. You wouldn't want to go and give your kid to some random stranger. You're going to give it to someone that you trust. So don't just turn aimlessly into Van Dijk. Use that ball, protect it, and ensure that if I do turn here, can I trust what I'm going to do? And that sort of approach can help.
You heard it here first. Van Dijk is the child catcher. Actually, you make a really good point in that I often find if I do that, move the ball away from the centre-back after the ball's been played in, they'll just try and follow you with the centre-back and open up this huge gap in the centre of the pitch, right? And if you're playing at this kind of level where you're trying to, get champs, etc., you will see that a lot. during playoffs when you're playing players who are maybe less experienced at holding their position, switching player to another player with the right stick to move to a midfielder to then put the pressure on with a midfielder. They'll go straight to the centre back and try and put pressure on you, which will allow you space in behind. So yeah, I think that's a really good point and something that people can do very simply. And then actually the other one, probably also fairly straightforward, would be just not sprinting as much as people want to sprint.
Yes, I think that is another one that can feel a little bit alien-like to some people because they've just been so used to hammering that sprint button throughout their many years of playing this game that it can feel weird. The way you can take that approach of, okay, don't sprint anywhere near as much, I would invite you to play 5 games where you are not allowed to touch a sprint button unless you are defending. So obviously when you don't have the ball, or when there is just, let's say you're playing 𝗵𝗽𝗍 in on goal and he's, obviously then you can sprint, but the rest of the game, just dribble. I can kind of allow you to control sprint because I think that's a feature this year where if someone does step into you quickly, you can actually let go of control sprint and adapt. But if you don't want to do that, that's fine. Just play 5 games where you are not allowed to touch a sprint button when you have the ball. And you will realize so much that you will be in a lot more control. You will see what's going on. You'll see that left back come flying out at you because everyone wants to win the ball straight away. And then you give the ball off to your midfielder. The left back's out of position. You play the ball out to your winger. Then the left centre back has to cover for the left back. And then, oh, look at that gaping hole in the middle for my striker. It sounds so simple, but it can work like that.
Yeah, I think some of it too boils down, like, stop forcing it. Like, just stop trying to. And if you're sprinting, you're forcing it. Like, that's it. Like, you have to be a little bit patient. You have to stop forcing it. And then the inverse of that on the defensive side is second man press. If you're holding second man press all the time, and I fall prey to this as well, you are going to call players out of position, period.
Yeah.
Play some games without it and see how it feels.
Yeah, there's an interesting point on forcing it generally. I think there is quite a bit of emphasis on using specific things, mechanics, etc., to create chances, where actually a lot of the time your opponent will make a mistake that you can exploit rather than you needing to do something to crack their defense, essentially. Especially when you're playing something like playoffs, your opponents are not going to defend perfectly and they are going to give you opportunities. And I guess, Alex, the big thing is taking advantage of those opportunities.
So the way I like to approach it, and again, I'd say up to 14 wins is where this kind of philosophy can approach for everyone. Let the opponent make the decision for you. And what I mean by that is you don't need to actually be so proactive in what you're doing a lot of the times. The opponent will just go, oh, look, there's the ball. I want to come and get that ball. So they might pull a centre mid up a little bit too aggressively. Okay, they've made the move. Brilliant. Now we can look to lay the ball off. And then they bring that left back up. And again, that snowball kind of happens. When you take a more mindful approach and say, I'm going to react to what I see on my screen and what the opponent does, and they have made that decision, I am then going to move from that and treat it almost like a game of chess. They make their move, you then make your move. Too many people are eager to want to try and make the move themselves to score a fancy goal when they don't need to do that. They can just capitalize on the opponent's rash defending, and all those sort of decisions that they do. But then on the flip side, that approach will work for you and you'll see results from that and you go, yeah, great, thank you very much. And then you'll start to get into your division rivals and your champs and you start to play more tougher people. And then that approach basically goes out the window because now they might come flying out with their fullback, for example, but their 1v1 defending or 2v1 scenario is so good that it almost doesn't matter. And then you do have to think outside the box. And that's where you then need to be proactive. So take that approach with a pinch of salt, but that I think is something that can massively help for people, that you don't need to be doing all these crazy things at times to score goals on the game. Just take advantage of the opponent's mistakes. And that happens so many times throughout the match.
Yeah, and that makes total sense.
It takes me back. Learning the game as a kid, there's always that one dude on your team that thinks he can dribble everyone, right? And your coaches, like my coach did this, and I feel like it's a common thing. It's like, okay, I want you to race the ball to like wherever, like 20 yards away, 20 meters, whatever, 10 meters. He's like, okay, ready, set, go. And the player starts like running. I think you just kick the ball. And it's obviously gets there before them. The same is very much true on FC.
Yep.
If you want to switch the point of attack, if you want your opponent to have to react to you, you need to be able to pass. And you're going to be able to create opportunities faster than if you were to just try to dribble everyone.
Yep. I'd also say something that I feel like isn't especially complicated mechanically, but will help your passing a lot, is just tapping the R1 or RB button to call a player short. Sometimes your players will make intelligent runs and it works out fine and you can play those easy passes. Sometimes they'll just, for some reason, not make the runs you want or move into the space you want. And that can really help just to hold possession.
I start spamming RB often, but in my head I always imagine, you see like the left back or right back, or maybe it's a center back or whoever, trying to progress the ball up the pitch in real life, and they feel like nobody's moving for them appropriately, so they throw their hands up, kind of by their sides, and they're like, "What do you like? Where are you?
What do you want me to do with it? Yeah.
Yeah, what do you want me to do?" And so when I feel like I'm in those positions, I just start spamming R1. And I'm like, dude, I want all 10 players to come towards me.
Yep.
Like I just start spamming it. And it's like, okay. And then the same perp can be true on the flip side in some ways, where I wouldn't recommend it necessarily to the extreme, but when you break a press, break a line, you break through someone's midfield line and you're all of a sudden running at their back line and their back line is retreating rather quickly, that's when I start spamming L1. Because I want all that movement to start happening very, very quickly.
Yeah, I do think that's also, mechanically not complicated to do if people want to try it, and is something to give a go. Let's just move on to shooting quickly. You mentioned reliable finishing. What would that entail? And do people need to look at, shooting stats, play styles, and that sort of thing to be able to actually be reliable in their finishing?
The one thing I always like to touch on is player profiles, where you take a look at your player and you go, how am I going to score with this person when you're talking about a striker, right? If you have a striker in your team that has finesse shot, it obviously means you are going to be looking for a lot more finesse shots than you would do if someone has power shot plus, for example. So playing to that specific player's strengths will always do you a world of good. Now, it doesn't mean every time you get in on goal, power shot or finesse shot, depending on what they have. And one I would completely disregard, by the way, is chip shot. I think chip shot playstyle is just not good enough to kind of use that as a reliable way. But as a whole, if we take out playstyles and we just look at the core shooting mechanics, what are we looking for? Inside the 18-yard box, let's say we're stood at the penalty spot. We're slightly to the right-hand side of the penalty spot and we're looking at the goal from the player's perspective. If we're on a right footer, we are going to shoot across our body, which is just a normal circle or B shot. And that, when we're inside the 18-yard box, is going to be 2 and a bit bars of power. That is one of the most reliable ways to finish. Let's move that player a little bit closer to the goal. So now they're on the 6-yard box and they're slightly more to the right. Well, we can rifle it in at the near post. That's another good way to finish. And then the other way that we can look to finish inside the 18-yard box is going for a low driven. A low driven has changed a few years ago with how we do them. And that's where you have to tap the shoot button. And to get the actual percentage of it is you have to have 40% or less power to get a low driven. You have 4 bars of power as your total available to you. So you need to be under 2 bars of power. So about 1 3/4, let's say. And that gets you under that 40% mark. And those are really good when there's some players in the way, they've got a chance to block. It just makes it really difficult for the goalkeeper to save, especially if the goalkeeper comes rushing out. You can just look for these little low drivens as a really reliable way to finish inside the 18-yard box. Now, what other finishes can we go for? If we're on the edge of the 18-yard box and we take 1 touch out to the side, then we can look for those finesse shots. We can obviously look for the Travellas as well. But those are kind of the core sort of finishes that I think most people will look to go for inside the 18-yard box. And to top it off as well, especially now we're seeing so many more cards with it. Werner has it, 𝘬𝘚ci has it, 𝘍𝘂𝘐 has it. The Power Shot Plus, where you would normally go for a normal shot across goal, for example, you can actually just power shot it. As long as you aim correctly, it actually gives the goalkeeper no chance to save as well. So that can also be ultra reliable.
Yeah, that's a good point. One thing I did want to mention quickly is time finishing. And I know it's a more advanced thing, obviously. Although I'd argue there's also not too much harm in just timing it late, because you're not going to end up ruining your shot by doing that, and it gives you a chance at green timing it. But anyway, 𝘬𝑺 was asking, I feel I've managed to get the hang of time finishing this cycle, but only when I have the meter on. You can't see it in champs. How do you guys manage to green time shots without the meter? Is there a specific part of the shooting animation that you need to focus on, or is it just through repetition you feel more used to green timing regularly?
Ooh, I learned how to green time, Ben.
Oh, you did?
I finally did it.
Wow.
I know. For me, I I just shamelessly did it. I was like, I made the mental choice that I'm going to go for the green time every single time that I take a shot. Every single time. And I think the bigger thing, you like start to get used to the timing, but oftentimes when the meter, in the beginning, I was trying to like time the meter. And I think that's a good way to start getting used to it. But then you have to stop looking at the meter, because what happens is when you transition to champs, you don't see the meter. And by the end of your champs run, you've stopped using it again because you're not thinking about it. You might think about it for the first few matches, and then you really have to focus on an intense match and you're not thinking about it. So I think getting like a general hang of the timing with the meter is great. And it's a good reminder. I keep it on in Rivals just as something to continue working on my timing. But you just want to shamelessly do it every single time, and who cares if you don't get it right? The way I would describe it is like my FC level, I'd maybe like plateaued, and I had to go a little bit backwards while I missed some maybe easy chances to get off of that plateau and get higher in the long run. And I think that's the way a lot of mechanical changes go, not just in this game, but in any sport. Like if you're playing golf or something and somebody changes your grip because you've got a terrible grip, well, it's going to feel horribly uncomfortable to begin with. But once you get the hang of it, it'll allow you to start reaching another level.
Yeah, and I assume you saw Brammer's managed to learn it and thought, I can't be having that.
Yeah, that's it. Look, I can't have Brammer's pulling off anything that I can't pull off.
Yeah.
It's not acceptable behavior.
Exactly. And actually, just quickly, Alex, in terms of the, I guess, visual cue, it is meant to be, although it doesn't always exactly line up, when the player makes connection with the ball that you press it again, right? Or something like that?
Yeah, so you have to take, obviously, input delay into it as well. So the way I think you can vision it, a player, when you press shoot, pulls their leg back. And then when they're in that downward motion, as that downward motion is about to start, roughly that's when you're going to be looking to hit your kind of second time of the time finish. I know Japes has been using it there, but one of my biggest advocates for when wanting to learn time finishing is don't use the meter, because it isn't meant to be there in Rivals or Champs. They reintroduced it into Rivals this year randomly. I don't know why, but it's not there in Champs. If they then take it away again next year, you find yourself in that same position where you're like, okay, they've took it away now. What do I do? Time finishing, when you are learning it, yes, you want to kind of try and see when the player is about to strike the ball, and that's your cue to then press the shoot button again. But it is nothing more than just muscle memory. When the ball gets whipped in for a volley or a header and I time finish it, I'm not looking at when my player's about to strike. It is literally just that muscle memory of knowing this is when I press shoot and this is how long I have to wait to then do it again. So don't get too caught up in the moment. Just try and say, my last one was red timed, which meant I just did it way too early. Let's try and be a little bit later. Oh, that was a yellow. Oh, that was white. And just find that sweet spot. It is very much a practice makes perfect with time finishing. The best kind of advice you can have before you play the games, go to skill games, go to practice scenarios, go into the attacking scenarios, and go and nail 5 green time finishes. And that'll just kind of get you into that rhythm for it.
I mean, if you want to put in the time to learn it this year and have the meter up there, you're going to go in, unless they say we've changed how timed finishing works, the timing is still going to be the same. And at that point, it's like second nature anyway.
So many people then get reliant though on looking at the timed window, don't they? And that's where I then go, if they ever take that away, that's where, once they take it away, it's like, oh, I get a little bit flustered. So that's why I don't like, introducing it.
But they take away and add stuff then you just have to adjust a little bit and learn it again. Like I just feel like if you're trying to learn it and add it to your game, you're trying to do it for this year in the present. You're not saying, gosh, in FC 25 by team of the year, I'm going to be a timed finisher. And whether it should be in there or shouldn't be, you should use the tools that are available. And it is an excellent teaching tool to remind you and start to get a feel for it, to make sure that it is second nature and muscle memory, so that when the next game rolls around, it's still muscle memory.
Oh, I get all sides of the argument and the logic and whatnot. And if it was consistent across all game modes, then I'd probably have it on. But because it's not, to me, that change of like one game mode I have it, one game I don't, just makes it a little bit off for me.
Yeah, I know. I can kind of see why that might be a bit confusing, having it on sometimes, off sometimes, etc. But I do think, especially when you're learning it, it is really, really helpful just to be able to visualize what's actually happening as much as anything. Japes, you're going to dip, and then we'll tee up Alex with a couple of quick questions and wrap up the pod. So yeah, Japes, thank you very much for coming on as always.
Cheers, Ben. Enjoyed it. Always a pleasure. I love the ones when there's not full alignment. It's way more fun that way. Different strokes. It's the way the world works.
Yeah.
And it's great fun. And I very much enjoyed the chat today. So enjoy the rest of the questions. I will catch you all next time.
See you, Japes. And we'll take a quick break on that and be back in just a moment. Hello, listeners. A quick reminder that this podcast is made possible through the generosity of supporters out there. And actually, they aren't just doing it out of the kindness of their heart, because you get a whole extra podcast every single week as a supporter. And you can sign up for a 7-day free trial right now over on Patreon. And after that, it's just £3 a month to continue supporting. It makes a huge difference. The podcast for a time wasn't able to be weekly because I had other work commitments, but this has made it possible to deliver a podcast every single week, and in fact, an extra one too, just for supporters, as I mentioned. So if that interests you and you want that extra content, and actually if you would like even more, there's the supporter Discord at the gold tier. There is the Hall of Fame at the end of the podcast in the icon tier. There are loads of perks available. So why not check it out if you haven't done so already by searching Support FUT Weekly or following the link in the description of this podcast. If you consider doing so, that would be hugely appreciated. And a big thank you to all those supporters, as I said, keeping the podcast going and keeping FUT Weekly weekly. Right, let's get back into the pod. Hello, welcome back after the break. We're just going to do a bit more here because we wanted to get to a question and also cover actually the bit in 𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀 question where he mentions being an 11 to 14 win player in Champs last cycle and this year not being able to get into Champs finals at all. I think this is actually very interesting, and I'd be keen maybe if 𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀 can send some gameplay, maybe we could take a look at it, because that is, Alex, I would say quite an unprecedented drop-off. It's not something I particularly hear about, going from 11 to 14 to not being able to qualify at all over the course of a cycle. I don't know whether there are specific things that, because it is such a drastic drop-off, he may want to look at beyond the things we've mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, it is a drastic kind of drop-off. I think to start off the conversation would kind of be the person or the player that you were last year isn't the player that you are now. So I think having a kind of conversation with yourself to understand and accept kind of where you are now, and that is a player that isn't qualifying for Champs, and to kind of let go of where you were last year, it can be a bit of like an ego check, I suppose, to a hard pill to swallow, really. That, you know, there is a big difference between you last year and you now. So when we kind of understand, right, I'm not an 11 wins player, I am a player that can't qualify for Champs, and I'm in Division 6 at best, and you have that conversation and you're happy with that, then I think we can look to move forward. And how we then look to move forward is you have to be super honest with yourself and really look over your gameplay and identify where those things are going wrong. Because to have that sort of change, and, you know, for you not to qualify for Champs now, there has to be something going wrong in your gameplay, right? We don't just go from 11 to 14 wins last year, Division 3, to where we're at now. So really, I'd start off with the defense. I think attacking, for most people, you'll score goals, right? If you can tighten up that defense, I think that will help you massively. So just taking a look, are we mindlessly dragging centre-backs out? Are we second-man pressing just crazy? Are we rushing out and trying to charge at the opponent left, right and centre? Are we trying to win the ball all the time? You know, the defending at times can just be about putting numbers behind the ball and just trying to make it difficult for the opponent. And you'll naturally win the ball back more times than you can count from doing that. So having kind of a serious conversation with yourself, 𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀, and being real, I think will massively help you. And, you know, you've said, you know, oh, should I just give up? No, at the end of the day, if you want to play the game and enjoy the game, there's always room for improvement. You can improve, you can get better. Just to start with, just go over your own gameplay and say, okay, I think this is bad, and that's what we're going to work on for the next 3 to 4 weeks. And that's it, really. And doing that over time, you will start to see the results kind of come through, and you might reach a point where you plateau a little bit, and then you have to draw it back again and really focus, and then you'll go a bit further, and then you'll plateau, and just the cycle just keeps on kind of going forward. So that should help. And yeah, as Ben said, you know, maybe just sending over some gameplay to someone, whether it's myself or getting someone to take a look over it, can kind of make that process a little bit quicker for you.
Yeah, convenient plug actually, Alex. You do offer coaching, so if people would like to take advantage of that, they can do so. And I think having someone else look at the gameplay can obviously not only save your time and energy, but also open up a load of things that you probably haven't spotted. Something that I know a lot of listeners have done in the past and feel it's been really, really good value. Certainly a lot better value than other things you can spend money on in the world. So yeah. Where can people find that actually, Alex, if they are interested?
You can head over to my website, AlexBeeofficial.com, and all the information's on there. Or just shoot me a message on Twitter if you have any questions.
Nice, perfect. And the other thing I was going to say, which is a potential cause of, I think, varying results, is the time you play the game. And it's very underrated, but the quality of player that you will face if you're playing between, say, 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. in the UK versus after those hours and before those hours is quite different, actually. And for those people out there who have some flexibility in terms of when they're able to play their games, actually, you've probably noticed this. And I'm just thinking if 𝘂̀less_hawk was maybe playing his games during that window where there is a bigger pool of players, essentially, it's not just hardcore players, last cycle, and then this cycle, he's playing at hours when there are just really committed players on, then that could actually really change your results. When you play playoffs, really changes the results you get. If you play it on a Thursday, day before champs, finals, you'll tend to find matchmaking, I would say, easier. If you play it maybe later on the weekend or on a Monday, it is often really committed players just, wanting to grind out some extra packs, and maybe they've finished champs quickly, they decide to go into playoffs, something like that. So just bear that in mind too. And of course, connection can be a factor, so it's worth looking into that. Again, if you're a supporter, there is an episode dedicated to connection, which you can find, and it's in the description of all the supporter podcasts. So definitely check that out. A final quick question for you, Alex, I wanted to get in is we had a question about super subs from Leafs. He says, with more and more players being released and with Relentless and Relentless Plus, the need for subs because of fatigue is low. I'm sure an obvious factor to consider with subs is pace, since subs don't get that chem style boost, but I'm still interested in what other attributes the panel looks for in subs. And I would say probably just to expand this out a bit, you're looking at play styles, skill moves, and I guess it's really going to vary position to position, Alex. But I guess what are your go-to subs in the game at the moment?
I mean, when you're looking at it, you want players that can play a variety of positions. So it might be someone that can play up front and on the wing. You might want a midfielder that can play the kind of the box-to-box role, may even fill in at fullback. So having that sort of stuff can be good as well. You have 5 subs, so you are really, the world's kind of your oyster when it comes to having that kind of selection. The big stats that I tend to look out for are composure. Composure is a huge thing in the game that we want to try and make sure if we're bringing someone on, they get a chance on goal, they are going to, have the best possible chance at finishing it. I think another thing as well is that if you're bringing on an attacker, they need to have good short passing and vision. You can bring on a striker and sometimes their short passing can be so bad. Like you said, we're not getting any chemistry style boost because they come on with no chem. So that even means it matters so much more. Another thing as well, I think, is aggression. If you can have a sub that's coming on with a bit of aggression and good reactions, it just means they're going to be there to not only have that pace, but then fight for those loose balls a little bit more and kind of give you that little bit more oomph that you need to try and get back into the game. So that is something to kind of take an eye out with. Playstyles wise, I think that comes down to you and your personal preference. I bring on Lukaku, for example. I'm not trying to play the ball into his feet and look to dribble and do some fancy skill moves. There's one thing that I'm doing with Lukaku, and that's getting the ball into the box. So when you're thinking about play styles, just think about how you are wanting to use this player. If you're bringing on a winger and they've got a quick step, that means you want to try and get past the opponent with some step overs or just sprinting or, whatever it may be, and kind of playing onto that. In terms of ones that I use, I run an RTG and pretty much a full untradeable team. So I still use players like Lukaku, 𝗪𝗛𝘂. In the middle of the park, I occasionally make some changes. I bring on the 𝘵𝘠𝑚𝑜𝑑𝑖 𝘵𝑐𝗱𝗰 at centre mid at times as well, and she does really, really well. So I think it just comes down to who you've got available. You don't want to spend a ridiculous amount of coins on your sub players. So using some sort of untradeable players there can be super beneficial.
Yeah, that makes sense. Would you encourage people to bring on players who can kind of change your playstyle a bit to vary up how you're attacking? Because that is something I do, because I don't always have an aerial threat on the pitch, but will sometimes bring them on.
Yes, but not to maybe the point that you maybe see in the real life game. I think, when teams are chasing a game and they kind of just go to let's yeet it into the box, left, right, and centre. You've got fundamentally understand how crossing works and whatnot. So yeah, do definitely look at some players that might just a bit of a roll of the dice that might change things up for you ever so slightly. You know, if you've got a pretty small striker up front who can't really beat the Van Dijk in a shoulder to shoulder, but then you bring on that player of the month, Højlund, or, you know, Lukaku or whoever it is, it might give you a bit of a different avenue that you haven't had throughout that game so far. So it can be something to think about. And even like with the play styles, you might bring on a fullback who has whip pass instead, and just those sort of things. So yeah, you can change up the play style to just throw a couple more questions at the opponent, but don't just go full, I'm just going to put it into the box and hope for the best.
Yeah, that makes sense. And talking about performing in the closing stages, Alex, you've certainly done that at the end here when it is just us left. So I appreciate that. And thank you very much for joining us, giving your insight, etc.
No, thank you very much for having me as always. It's appreciated.
Yeah, it's been great. And where can people catch you again? I know you just said earlier, but it's good to plug it.
You can get me over on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, just AlexBee Official, and you'll find us on there.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much to Alex for joining us. And thank you very much to you, listener, for joining us too. If you haven't yet subscribed, then please do via all the various different podcast platforms and on YouTube. If you're catching this on YouTube, do leave a like, drop a comment. It definitely does help out. And if you'd like an extra podcast every single week, a supporter exclusive episode, then you can get it. There's a 7-day free trial over on Patreon. And after that, it's just £3 a month for an extra podcast every week. That'll be the gameplay pod if it's content on the main feed and vice versa. So just search Support FUT Weekly in your search engine or follow the link in the description of this podcast to make your way over to Patreon. Right. Thank you very much if you are a supporter, keeping the podcast going. And a big thank you too to all these icon patrons: Dave B, Hugh J, Darren W, Alistair M, Don P, Rob P, Jeff B, Damon H, Tom B, Adam G, Neil P, Alex M, Jake S, Dan W, Roger D, Lee A, Andrew C, Nishant, Waterman, Dylan H, Adam R, Rob L, Brendan W, Michael K, David G, Jimmy K, John D, Michael B, Aditya S, and Joshua K. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add though. Ultimate Team is a bit like life really. It has its many ups and downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.